All right, guys, here we go. I finally did it. So, back in, I think it was July, Tenet came out. And if you saw the movie, you know that there was a horrible mixing done with the film, meaning that the sound was completely messed up. And when you would go see the movie in theaters, the sound effects and the music were louder than the dialogue track, meaning that almost nobody that saw the movie was able to understand what the characters in the film were saying. So, because of that, it was easily the worst film experience that I went to in the theater that was not related to an audience and was just an element of the film, which is something I've never experienced really. So because of that, I didn't even give Tenet a review on my Instagram channel because I didn't have any thoughts on the movie, good or bad, because I was not able to understand the movie. Since then, I got the movie for the holidays in this really nice steelbook edition from my dad, and I've been able to watch the movie with subtitles so I don't miss a fucking word, and I was able to try to begin to understand the crazy plot of this film. Because the thing is, even with subtitles, the movie is extremely hard to understand. So, not being able to understand most of the film in the theater was extremely horrible to experience, really. So, now that I've seen the movie a couple of times, I can actually give my critical feelings of the movie and also begin to fully understand what the hell is actually happening in the film. Tenet is pretty good. It's probably Christopher Nolan's most ambitious film, which was probably held by Inception before. But if we're comparing the complexity of the plots, this movie makes Inception look like a four-piece puzzle for children. It's easily his most complicated uh, and most complex film. And that's pretty interesting when you think of the movie that he made before this being Dunkirk, where that is easily the simplest film that he's ever made in his career. It basically has no real plot and characters, and it's more of a war simulator, and it completely achieves its goal in being that. Dunkirk is a really well made and entertaining film. But here with Tenet, it's the complete opposite, where he really gets into his weird explanations of Inception type stuff, where things you got to pay attention to every single detail in the film so you can understand what's going on. And it was really funny because I watched this movie with my brother. We had the subtitles on, so we were able to understand everything. And I'm not kidding. We paused the movie once at the 3 minute mark to try to completely understand what was going on, and then once again at the 5 minute mark to completely try to catch up and get what was going on. And all of this intro to the film isn't even related to the whole idea of inversion and anything moving backwards. Throughout the movie, my brother and I were drawing like different diagrams to try to understand and try to explain what was going on. And I feel like even by the end of the movie, we still didn't completely get what was going on, but we had a much better grasp in comparison to the first time we saw the movie where we didn't understand anything that was happening. Watching Tenet the first time was like watching a foreign film without the subtitles. It was really frustrating, and I didn't hold it against the film itself. I just knew that there'd have to be a time in the future where I watch it in proper conditions, where I can pause the movie, think about it, watch it with subtitles, and try to grasp the crazy narrative that Christopher Nolan was unraveling for us. From a technical perspective, of course, it's amazing. Like, Christopher Nolan literally crashed a plane to make this movie, and it's not the first time he's crashed a plane to make a film, as we've seen in The Dark Knight Rises. At the beginning of that film, plane also is actually crashed, and it like visually it's incredible. Like there's no doubt about that. And in terms of the concepts of some things being inverted and some things moving normally, that's all really complex and really interesting. And especially in the final battle, it's all very visually interesting. But I think that there's a lot in this movie that could have been done more simple, and we could have enjoyed more of things moving forwards and backwards without trying to concentrate on every little detail. If I had to use one word to describe this movie, aside from ambitious, it would probably be homework, which isn't great because you can't really just sit back and enjoy it. And I think with something like Inception, you can definitely do that, where you look at the movie and it does have a lot of complex ideas, but you can also keep up with those ideas and sort of enjoy the ride. Where my brother and I had somewhat of a tough time figuring out what was going on throughout the entirety of the film. This is one of Christopher Nolan's films that are very plot driven and story driven, and the characters are not as important. Like, there's this idea in the film of people that are labeled as protagonists and antagonists, and our main character is literally credited on IMDb as the protagonist, played by John David Washington. And there isn't really a lot to him that is interesting as a character. He's more of a vessel into the world. We see everything through his eyes, and we are the protagonist. But there isn't a lot about him that's very complex. The complexity is in the story. Not that John David Washington isn't doing a really good job as an actor. He's doing everything he's supposed to. And the same thing goes for Robert Pattinson. I think he's probably a little bit more interesting than the protagonist. But for the most part, the characters in the movie aren't really interesting. Not that they have to be in a story where the main focus is the story, not the characters. But the characters aren't very interesting. And the same thing with Kenneth Branagh's character. I don't Sator, I believe his name is. He's the antagonist of the film, and he basically realizes that he's going to die, and he just wants to end the world. And there's not a lot of depth in that when it comes to, the characters, like I said. And his wife, played by Elizabeth Debicki.
Okay, I see. Okay.
So, good night.
Good night.
Eric.
Just, 1 second. Okay, baseball, Vietnam, Richard Nixon, Pat Boone, the girl that does the weather. No. Okay, jellyfish, really big spiders. Come on, dig deep. Okay. The day we backed over Skipper in the driveway, instead of going to the county fair, I had to bury him in the backyard. Okay.
She has a little bit more to do and a little bit more complexity, but again, it's not really enough to think of her as interesting. Though there is some interesting connections between her and John David Washington in terms of, there is a bit of chemistry there, but it really isn't a lot. I think Nolan probably bit off more than he could chew when it came to telling the story in such a elaborate way. I think that I remember something about like there being so many drafts of this script, which I'm really not surprised. But I think that it's too complex for the majority of people to understand. There's so many subreddits about explaining this movie, where it's one of those things where you sort of get most of it in the moment, but when you're finished watching it, you're going to forget it. You're gonna think to yourself, I remembered what that movie was about in the moment, but I can't really explain it to someone. Like, if you asked me to explain Tenet to you, I wouldn't be able to really explain the plot. Even on the back of the Blu-ray that I have, it's absolute bullshit what the movie is about. So I don't know that I have much of an opinion on the movie, because when you watch it, it's so much, you use so much goddamn brain power to the full, like to the max, to try to follow what's going on. And then you question, am I even enjoying this? Because I'm spending so much time trying to understand and concentrate on what's happening, to the point where sometimes it didn't even feel like it was enjoyable to watch the movie. And I don't mean thinking like on an intellectual and deep level. I love that in filmmaking. But with this, it's more on a technical level and understanding all the rules, that it's really hard to keep up with it. And if you've seen the movie, then you'll understand what I mean. And if you haven't seen the movie, I really encourage you to watch it, and to especially watch it with subtitles, and don't be afraid to pause it to try to make sense as to what's going on. But yeah, it's really, like, I sound like a broken record, but it's tricky to follow the movie. There's even a part in the movie where John David Washington's character, the protagonist, is being explained how inversion works, and the scientist woman who's explaining it to him literally says, "Don't try to think about it too hard, just feel it." And I feel like that's sort of a message from Christopher Nolan to the audience. But when he lays out everything that's going on, you can't not think about it too hard. And it's done differently than one of my other favorite movies, Looper. If you've seen Looper, there's a scene where Joseph Gordon-Levitt is talking to himself from the future, and himself from the future says, "Let's not worry about time travel because we're going to be stuck here drawing diagrams all day." And I really love that because it's sort of Ryan Johnson, the writer of that film and the director of that film, telling you, don't worry, don't hurt, your heads with the time travel, just enjoy the ride. But in Tenet, the issue is they tell you not to worry about it, but you can't just enjoy the ride because they try to explain the ride to you. Whereas in Looper, there isn't that problem because it says, don't worry about the time travel, and the time travel just happens without the characters spending every scene of the movie trying to explain the time travel to you. I do definitely think that Tenet is worth a watch, and I don't think it's bad by any means. It's just in this really weird gray place where I have, even after now understanding the majority of it, I don't really get my feelings towards the movie. It just feels like homework or a bit of a chore to try to understand it, but that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it really complex and tricky to follow in a way that may be appealing to some, but not to others. And the sound mix doesn't really lend any help to you trying to put together what Christopher Nolan is laying out for you. It is a really well-made movie, though. Of course, it's shot super well because Christopher Nolan is a badass when it comes to that. Acting is great all around. There's a lot of Christopher Nolan regulars if you've followed his filmography. Like Michael Caine shows up. So yeah, I'm not saying don't watch it. I'm saying I think you should watch it and sort of develop your own opinion on the movie, because it's really a weird anomaly. And I was looking forward to it because I love Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker. But yeah, it's just in this weird spot where I think I'm going to have to watch it a few more times before I really have an understanding of whether or not I like it. I understand it, but I don't know if I like it. Also, I almost forgot to mention the score, which I can't believe because I'm such a movie score nerd. But Ludwig Göransson did the score for this, and I'm a big fan of his work on The Mandalorian, and he's also done sitcoms, which I found pretty weird. But yeah, his music in the film uses a lot of weird, like notes being reversed. And there's this one scene in particular where they're trying to get this briefcase, and John David Washington's on a fire truck. And the music's really weird and cool in that scene and throughout. And the reason they got Ludwig Göransson for this is usually Hans Zimmer does Christopher Nolan's films, but Hans Zimmer was busy doing Denis Villeneuve's Dune, so they weren't able to get him, and instead they got Ludwig Göransson. But I think he did a pretty good job, and he always gets really weird and experimental when it comes to his scores. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. I almost forgot. So yeah, that sort of wraps up my thoughts on Tenet. Thank you for clicking on the video, and I'll have another film review soon.